Dr. Dean Beckloff has been working as a counselor with students, families, kids, and teens for over 40 years. As the founder of the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, Dr. Dean focuses on children and families that need a little extra help via counseling. Each week with Dr. Elizabeth Zach, we discuss all things family related to help people create the positive family they want to build. Welcome to the Dr. Dean Show.
Welcome to our show today. This is our maiden voyage, and we're just excited to be putting this on and putting it out there for people and the good folks who are trying to deal with parenting and how do we do it. And we're just going to be trying to have different people on this show so that we can really explore and improve. That's what we want to do, is improve. Today, we are so excited to have Dr. Zach, Dr. Liz Zach. Dr. Zach works at our office. She's a psychologist. She works with children. She works with teens. She works with adults. She's had experience working with elderly folks in counseling as well. She is absolutely stunning and fabulous. And so I'm really looking forward to having a chat with her, because really we're just going to be talking together. So let me introduce Dr. Zach at this point, and
thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here too.
Yeah,
we're just
pleasure.
really excited to have you and your expertise. And the thing that I'm excited about is talking a little bit about something that you have an interest in and something that I have an interest in, which is the brain. The growing and developing brain of the child, and then how can we enhance their growth? I think, from early on in my training, it was by the age of 5, the kids' brains are done. They're already baked.
All formed and baked.
They're all baked, they're done. You don't have to worry about it. And now we know from the research that clearly, the brain of the child and the teen and the young adult is still growing and growing and growing, which can cause some issues, I think, in that development as well. One of our favorite people that both Dr. Zach and I like is Dr. Siegel. Anything you want to say about Dr. Siegel?
There are probably, it's kind of like Dave Letterman's top 10 list. There are probably 10 parenting books that I think are fabulous, and his research and his parenting guidance is definitely, would be in my top 10.
Oh, absolutely.
He is just amazing in helping us understand exactly what you're talking about, how our kids' brains are developing, how they change and how they're changeable. And I think that's really, as much as that can cause some challenges, I think that's where the hope is.
Yes.
There, we can teach and kids can learn, and from little bitty to our growing teens, there's so many opportunities for growth and learning.
And teaching, learning through the years, that is changing the brain of the child. From reading to writing to math, it's all changing that brain and helping the brain to mature. So we're really learning a lot more, and I think we're on the cutting edge. We're not there yet. I think we're going to be learning a whole lot more about kids. From my own personal experience, though, I have 2 kids, and one of them now is 33 and the other one is 29. And I noticed pretty early, wow, there's a lot of difference between the 2 of them. Raised in the same family, same people, but widely different. And I thought, there's a lot to how we come built on this planet.
How we are hardwired.
Yeah, we got some wiring. From things like read. Some kids are going to be, one of my kids was a reader. Loved reading, Harry Potter, all of it. The other one, not so much. Although now, as a young adult, she reads all the time. So there's just unique differences in how they learn. And then I think also personality as well.
Personality and temperament. Yep. I have 2 boys myself. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. And their personalities they are polar opposites. Polar opposites. One is as social as you can be, and the other one Not as much. And
Yeah,
raised in
yeah.
the same home, the same, genetics. And so it is very interesting how our kids come built, and we have to adapt. We have to adjust. There's no one size fits all parenting.
Correct. Yeah. And so one of the things we want to hit on is a couple of things that really enhance growth and development of the brain in the growing child. That's really what we want to be taking a look at here is how do we enhance that growth and that development so that it's positive? Because unfortunately, kids can go into life limping. It is true. They can get into adulthood and be limping. So how can we stimulate the growth of the child's brain so that they're able to manage emotions? That's a big one. And when you've got a toddler screaming at the top of their lungs, ayah. I mean, I saw
It's
this
tough.
joke one time where the lady, this was on Facebook, she said, at times they say you get superhuman strength when you are under great stress. The other night, I ripped the cork out of the wine bottle with my teeth during my child's tantrum. So,
Superhuman.
stress is hard on us. And when
It's
that
hard on
child
us.
is screaming
Yeah.
and yelling, it's hard to regulate ourselves too.
Absolutely.
So what do we do with a kiddo who's young? How about when they're in the middle years of elementary school? What are some of the things that you have found that you like from Dr. Siegel and others who are out there?
I think it first starts with maybe redefining how we look at discipline. When we're working with families and they come in, and one of the questions we ask is, how do you discipline your child? And 9 times out of 10, it's some sort of punishment, right? It's a timeout, it's a taking the device, it's a no, stop that. And if we kind of look at discipline less about gaining compliance in the short term, which we want to do, we need kids to comply. But if we look at discipline more in terms of teaching,
Yes,
to gain long-term growth, to build those brain connections so that the next time and the next time and the next time they have changed their behavior.
you said something that I think we really need to emphasize is that we can help the brain to change by how we interact in these kinds of situations, that we can assist the child to actually grow synapses that helps them to get to what we call, and this is taking it from Dr. Siegel, the upper brain, that prefrontal cortex right there, where they learn how to manage those emotions. And so there's ways of helping them to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's such an excellent point. We tend to, when we're struggling, it comes from a place of the lower brain, right? The reptilian brain. And that's where the reactive, the big yelling, the screaming, the fits, the tantrums comes from.
Yeah.
And we have to, our goal, I think, in parenting and disciplining is helping the child go from that place of reactivity to the upper brain, right, which is more of a place of responsivity, right? That's where they learn to problem solve, to reason, to regulate, to have empathy. And there's ways to go about doing that.
Yes.
And I think it is important to note, as much as we want the kid to get to that place of upper brain and responding rather than reacting, parents have to get there too.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much here. One of the things that I think you have said in the past to me is that the word discipline itself, doesn't it mean
Disciple
to teach?
means to teach.
To
Teacher.
teach. Yeah, to teach. So it is about teaching. It's hard, but when that kid is dysregulated, let me just put it that way. They're crying, they're yelling, they're tantruming, even at 2 and 3, of course. What's a parent to do?
I think it
Do you
starts,
pull the cork out of the wine
you
bottle
pull
with your
the cork
teeth?
and you run into your other room to get away. You take your own time out, which you might have to do, actually.
Yeah. Is there a way to engage with the child that will facilitate them doing that kind of learning where they're moving from what's called the lower brain, sometimes it's called the reptilian brain, and I'm sure many of you have heard that, up to that prefrontal cortex?
Absolutely. Dr. Siegel talks about, a model of initially connecting. That's step one. You want the child to know that they're being heard, that you're there for them. You don't like the behavior, but you love the child.
Yes.
And as much as they're throwing a fit or they're struggling in some way, we have to be there for the kiddo. And I always use the metaphor of, if a child is learning how to ride a bike and they are falling off and they're crying and they're upset and they don't know how to do it, it's a sign that they're still building the skills, and you run alongside them and you kiss the boo-boos and you encourage, and it's awful for you knowing that they're about to, veer off, but you keep going, and you as a parent love on that kid and continue to encourage.
So you're saying it's not okay to scream and yell at them when they fall down on the bicycle?
You probably won't get a lot of bike riding happening with that. But I think a tantrum or a struggle in some sort of behavior is a sign that the kid is still building those skills. And we have to love and encourage and kiss the boo-boos, the emotional boo-boos, just like, if they're riding the bike.
So it's about building skills.
It's about building skills and connecting.
And how do you do that? How do you do the connecting piece that you were talking about?
Mm-hmm. The first, I always talk about, when a child is struggling, showing that empathy, and it could be just initially a gentle touch.
Okay.
It could be a hug, if there will be receptive to that. When my kiddos,
when they're yelling, they may not be very receptive.
And that is fair. I know when my kiddos were little, I would always think, if they're getting big, I'm going to get little, right?
Oh.
So I might get on my knees if they're on a couch, get on my knees and just touch their knees, or just a gentle sort of way to sort of lower the emotional intensity.
Yes.
Think just connecting by touch, and then showing some empathy, right?
Correct.
So, letting them know that you understand their feeling. You don't necessarily agree with their feeling.
Yes.
But you can share that, they are very upset right now.
And do you do that with words?
You do that with words.
Okay.
You initially, I think you can do that non-verbally, and then you connect with your words, right? You're feeling very upset that your little brother took your toy.
Yeah.
You're really upset right now.
I think that people worry, especially with a very young child. They may not get it verbally, but my opinion is you need to do the verbalizations. You need to talk. I'm an old school teacher. I used to teach school, and I would introduce language that my kids weren't really old enough to know, but I would put it in context over and over again. That's learning and
growing the brain.
That I think is really interesting about language, and we get this from our speech and language people in their research, that language is the key to getting up here. It helps the kid to get here and brings them up there. And then they're learning what these words mean. So I guess I'm a proponent of early using these words that are about emotions, like fear and crabby. I'm kidding. But fear, anger, mad, sad.
Yes.
Obviously, with a small child, you'll want to use more developmentally appropriate words. But is that where you come from as well?
Absolutely. I think the research shows that, part of that going from lower brain to upper brain is is enhancing a kid's emotional vocabulary, being able to share their feelings rather than act out their feelings.
Yes.
And so by reflecting what you're seeing, you are building their emotional vocabulary. And we're teaching them that emotions are okay, right? It's not, oh, don't be mad at him or you shouldn't feel that way. It's their feelings.
Right, right.
And
I
those
have an
are okay.
example. When my children were little, I my oldest daughter had been wanting to take a bath with her baby sister. And finally, baby sister got big enough to sit in the bathtub. So we told her, hey, you can get in the bathtub with your baby sister. Well, she was back in her room, kind of dawdling, and we called and called. And finally, when she got into the bathroom, baby was being pulled out by mom because they were done. And my daughter started hooping, hollering, crying,
Not happy.
upset,
Not happy.
unhappy. And I did what they were telling me to do in my psychology courses. I did what we've been talking about, reflected back. Honey, you really wanted to take a bath with your baby sister, and you're very sad and mad. And she said, yeah. And then I said, you really, really, really wanted to, but she's through with her bath. And by this time, she's stepping into the bathtub, which is what we needed her to do. And she was calm and played in her bathtub. Now,
She
not
felt
every kid is
heard.
going to do that.
Right, right. Yep.
We have a
Yep.
lot of parents who come in and their kids just are not calming down.
Right.
But, you know, that is, I think, a vital key. And that was back in the early days when we just thought that was a good thing to do. I think now what we're saying is it is changing the brain of the child in positive ways so that they can learn how to handle those emotions and learn to regulate.
Right.
Is that?
Absolutely. I would add to that, we tend to do too much talking as parents.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Right. We tend to go into fix-it mode. We tend to go into solving the problem, letting them know, you know, there's another way to see this. And I think initially kids just need to be heard. You know, when I first got married, I would come home with a work problem and share to my husband, and he would go into problem solving. You should email your boss, or you should do this, do that. And, you know, he forgot that he was married to a psychologist and quickly learned that what I needed from him was just to listen, just to let me vent, just to let me share. And you know, often I want him to just nod and agree.
But, you know, I think that's a human thing. When someone is struggling with something, we want to help. My youngest daughter is so much like that, and I appreciate it. She was the kind of kid that when we came in with loads of groceries, can I help? Can I help? If she saw a homeless person on the street, we got to help them. We got to help them. That's her immediate response. And I think all of us have that feeling of, I want to help. But sometimes, like you said, it's a time to listen.
It's a time to listen.
There's a favorite saying that I have kind of latched onto. Most people listen to respond rather than listen to understand.
Absolutely.
So how do you do that? How do you listen to understand?
You know, it's really, again, reflecting those feelings. It's using your I language. I'm hearing you say. It is letting them speak. We don't have to jump in. If they need to vent, let them vent. And then it's reflecting what you hear. I am hearing that you're really angry because little brother takes your toy and you don't think I help you.
Yeah.
They feel heard. Again, just by feeling heard and understood, we're going from that reactivity to that responsivity, which is where we need them to get to.
I love that answer too, because it also speaks to the reality of what's going on in their head. You're not helping. You're supposed to be doing something, Mom.
Right.
Dad, why aren't you doing something? This isn't fair. All those thoughts are going on in their head too. It's not fair.
Right.
And you're acknowledging that that's in their head. Too many times, of course, it's very easy to get defensive. I mean, we're human, we're people.
Yep.
And people get defensive, and parents can get defensive too.
Of course.
So how do we respond to what they are thinking and feeling at that point, and to be honest with the truth that that's what they're thinking?
Right.
Now, that may not be the truth about what's happening, but yeah. So I think that's very, very good. So really trying to show understanding is just pausing. And making sure by maybe even speaking back to them with language what it is that they are saying, and putting that back out there. I had a professor who was fantastic, Dr. Gary Landreth, and that guy said we need to be listening with our eyes. Right. Listen with your eyes. So how do you do that?
You know, I want to back up one
Sure.
minute if we can. I was thinking about, you know, in these interactions and how we, you know, can connect and how we can reflect those feelings and empathize. But I was thinking an important part of, I think, discipline is taking a step back and considering, you know, not only what we as parents want the child to learn, but even further back, considering the why of the behavior, right? I think sometimes we make assumptions. We think that my kiddos, you know, always struggled with homework after school, right? I mean, such a battle, and you know, it would become, you know, just a power thing, and they didn't want to do it. And I felt like, you know, if they were coming in from school, they still were in school mode, and that was the best time to do it. And, you know,
the brain's getting tired.
And the brain's getting tired. Well, and I think that's exactly the point. You know, when I took a step back and really looked at why are they pushing back so hard on doing 10 minutes worth of homework, you know, sometimes we have to consider there may be other things going on rather than a kiddo just not wanting to comply.
Right.
I like the acronym HALT. You know, is the child maybe hungry? Are they angry? Are they lonely? Are they tired?
Right.
When I took that step back and realized my kid just needs a snack.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he needs 30 minutes of a brain break because he's tired.
Right. And the snack also will re-stimulate and reinvigorate that brain. Particularly with tons of sugar, people. No, not sugar, but of course fruit would be excellent for the brain.
Right.
Maybe something fun.
Just taking a break and realizing that it's not a battle over getting the homework done. There's a reason that, you know, a kiddo may be struggling, and sometimes it's not as obvious, and we need to consider, you know, the why of the behavior, and then consider how we're going to go about addressing the behavior.
Okay. This brings me to a question that I think may be on the minds and hearts of a lot of people. Are we talking about coddling the child, spoiling the child, creating a monster who is going to be a narcissistic, terrible, no good adult because they were just coddled?
Right.
So what about that? And how do we balance that with what we're talking about?
Right. And I hear that a lot from, you know, more old school, right? Parents of, you know, when I'm trying to teach this model, you know, we're just spoiling, or we're not there. There should be consequences. And I think what we're talking about is not spoiling or not giving consequences, right? What we're talking about, there should be consequences to misbehavior.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely, there should be. And I think what we have to understand is we need to be consistent, but not rigid.
Good. Yeah.
We need to have rules in place, but we also, as parents, need to be flexible in knowing if our kiddo is having a tantrum because they're tired,
Right.
that we may not be able to get that bath in that night. We may have to do it in the morning.
Yeah.
It is being flexible in our parenting, but also knowing that rules are important, and we have to learn the right and wrong.
And there may be some consequences
And
coming.
there may be some consequences coming.
Now, we'll be talking about that at a later date, about consequences and what we can do about that. But, so really, we're not talking about coddling the child. It's really about trying to understand where that child is coming from and communicating to the kid that we understand.
Right.
And I like to even use the word, I understand. I get it. That's understandable.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it is understandable when we put ourselves in the shoes of our child. And, we have so many things that reflect that kind of attitude, but it's hard instinctively. And if we were raised in a particular way, we are going to instinctively go to that way,
Right.
is my opinion. I
Right.
could be wrong. And I also know that I wanted to do things a little bit differently. And I think I did succeed in some ways, but I'm still learning a lot. There's hope if you're old. You will still be able to grow mentally. But what does the parent do when, the parent gets tired? It gets frustrating when you have a screaming kid. And it just seems so logical that all you need to do is get in the bathtub. What do you do to harness yourself? And should you be harnessing yourself? Is it okay to blow up?
We're human. We are human. And, as much as, we can have lots and lots of tools in our toolbox, sometimes we lose it. Sometimes, we make mistakes. Again, going back to the very beginning, kiddos' brains are changing and are changeable. We can teach in those moments of missteps on our part.
Oh, good. Yes. Yes. So you're saying be upfront when you've blown it.
When you blow it, you be upfront. You own it. You're teaching, how when you make mistakes, you apologize. You let the kid know that you're human, that, sometimes, kids, they need to see that. They need to see that we're human, we make mistakes. And then we, shift and try to do things differently.
Yeah.
That's part of parenting.
I've always felt that, we do have parents that come in and they're coming into our clinic. And when they come in, they are saying they never take responsibility for their actions.
Right.
And of course, and we all know this, but modeling, have they seen it modeled?
Right.
Where we are up front, courageously, boldly taking responsibility for our own actions and behavior when we've blown it. It doesn't take a lot for a kid to realize that mom blew it. It doesn't take a lot for a kid to realize that dad blew it.
Right.
They know that. And when you acknowledge it, of course, that begins bringing peace to the brain of the child. I mean, they're not going to be going into life with distorted thinking. And that's going to be important as well. We don't want distortions as they move into adulthood. As far as moving on from the initial attempt to understand, what comes next? I mean, will that invariably bring down the emotions of the child and help them to start regulating?
It is really dependent on the situation. I think, kids have great recall. And if a kiddo is not able to have that, I like to use a lot of sports metaphors. My boys are very athletically minded, and sports are kind of part of our life. And I always think about having the post-game talk. Right during the game, it's going on and you're just kind of dealing with the plays. It's
And there could be a lot of
afterward.
emotions in
And
the
there
middle of the game.
could be a lot of emotions in the middle of the game. It's not the time necessarily for processing and reflecting and considering, and we need to shift and do this. It may need to come later when the game's over.
Yep.
And for a kiddo, that could be 30 minutes later. It could be the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It could be on the car ride home from school the next day.
Is that important? Is that another important step when there's been an issue and the kid has erupted, and maybe we felt like erupting on the inside, but we managed ourselves and we listened and understood? Is it important to have that kind of processing work going on, and why?
It's really critical if we're using the model of discipline, meaning teaching, right? Discipline, not just compliance in the short term, but again, wanting long-term learning and growth and changing that brain. Having that time to process and reflect when the child is responsive, when you are responsive, is critical. And it doesn't have to be a 30-minute conversation, right? Again, we tend to, we often talk more than we need to. We go into lecture mode. We have to be very conscious of the how we are having that conversation, not in a punitive necessarily, or you did this wrong, but in a collaborative sort of process. We want the kid to be thinking about, gosh, that was a big one. That was not a great situation. I don't know. What do you think? What could I have done differently? What could you have done differently? What can we do next time to prevent something like this from happening again?
I like that. I've always been a big believer that what we need to do is help them process, but I'm in agreement with you that we need to look at the timing of that. Because if they're in the middle of a lot of emotion, there is no use in doing it. No. And I learned that as a school teacher, that when the kid is calmed down, then we can talk about it. Yeah. Come, let us reason together. Right. That's when we can do it. But I love what you said too, that you maybe don't give answers and lecture. It's stimulating questions that the child responds to with language. Now, when you're first starting that, I'm a believer that it may take 2 minutes, and that's all they can handle. Maybe the next time you do that, they can handle 3 minutes of processing using language. But asking those questions, honey, what were you thinking about when that happened? Not what were you thinking, but what were you thinking about? What were you feeling during that time? What were you thinking that I felt? What do you think your mom felt when that was happening? We're trying to build, I think, what's called outsight. Right. Not insight, but what's going on in other people. Absolutely. And what's the impact on them? What's happening inside them? Because we're not just robots bumping around with each other. We're actually people, and we have an impact on each other. So that would be what I would consider social skill development. Absolutely. Is I love that. Being able to think with you. And I also love what you said, Dr. Zach, about looking at it from a problem solving. What can we do differently? What's next? Helping them to come up with some solutions and some thinking and some thoughts.
I think it's so helpful.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I love even kids often know, right? They know what we are likely to say. And so even using that, what do you think I'm going to say about what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you think I'm going to say about maybe what we should do next time? Getting them, again, to problem solve, to think, to reason, to empathize. I mean, these are all part of that growing brain that, we're trying to train and mold and shape and,
And
create good human beings.
It's a two-way communication then. It's not just the parent teaching, because that is true. As parents, we have a need to be teaching and training and educating, but sometimes we get into that step first.
Right.
What do you think about asking the child about what should happen as a result of their behavior? Because one of the things that I'm a big believer in is the child learning that it's not bad mama, bad daddy, bad teacher, I am responsible for what befalls me. So what do you think about consequences and even talking to the child about what should be the result of what happened?
Well, I know that we're going to continue this conversation and get more into consequences and kind of, next steps. But, it's been my experience that if you're able to get the child to be a collaborative participant in where we go from here, they tend to be much more responsive to those consequences. Often, I would let my kids tell me what they think their punishment should be, and they would be very creative and often might be even a step beyond what I might have suggested as a consequence.
Yes.
And that was always interesting to me when, I think that I probably need to, that sounds like a good idea. And so, I think having those conversations, letting them be a part of, talking through, next steps is very helpful for a child.
Well, it's very easy with consequences, for the kid to go two ways. Kids tend to be all or nothing, black and white, and they're thinking, and
Right.
us adults can do that too. But from one side of the game, it would be, well, I think that I will just not do it again. To the opposite end, which you're talking about, which is you need to ground me from my phone for 3 months, where it's way too much.
Right.
And then as the adult, we can help guide the process of maybe what the consequences should be. Well,
Yep.
I think we are getting out of time, and we are so glad to have you here, Dr. Zach.
It's my
You have
pleasure.
shed some amazing insight into working with kids. It's obvious that you have a lot of personal experience in that.
Absolutely.
And it's very helpful to not only have the knowledge and the psychological understanding, but then also the experience too. And so we really appreciate your time here and coming here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. We appreciate you tuning in. And we will be doing some more. We'll be looking at other things that are important in terms of the ingredients of parenting and how to help the child grow and develop well and have that future that will be making them very strong, courageous, and resilient people dealing with the ups and downs that everyone has to face. And we want them to have that kind of strength. So thank you for being in here with us today. We look forward to sharing more on all kinds of subjects having to do with parenting.